And so some of this is probably in there, but you know that Rhode Island always ranks at or near the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about that for a good year.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one change that the General Assembly can make in 2013 that would improve those positions for Rhode Island?
Improve the positions. Okay, so at the top of the heap, we look at what site selection executives, consultants look at in terms of their priorities when they're looking at regions, looking at places to invest. Consistently, the number one issue is state and regulatory tax schemes. So Rhode Island generally fares very poorly because we have a very high per capita tax burden, the property tax especially. And we took some steps back a couple of years ago to work on the personal income tax reform, as you recall.
Right.
So continuing to understand that taxes matter in the corporate environment in terms of business growth and new company formation and ability to retain talent and recruit talent into the marketplace. Taxes are an extremely important proposition. And
is there a particular proposal that the Chamber will take to the General Assembly leadership to the Hill come January and say, this is the one thing in the tax scheme or the regulatory scheme that you need to fix this year?
Okay, so we're always mindful and very vigilant to preserve the gains that were made 2 years ago when we reformed the personal income tax system. And one of the important aspects of it was to notice and pay close attention to what businesses are looking for. So what are businesses looking for on the tax front? They're looking for a competitive rate, they're looking for stability, they're looking for predictability. So to have vacillating tax tables, tax schemes, continuing to change, repeal, reintroduce, go back, backfill, none of that is helpful at all. So the first and foremost thing we will do is to make sure that we maintain what we've done in terms of reform.
Is there talk of changing any of the taxes?
Yeah, oh yes, there's always perennial discussion
Anything
about
specific?
Yeah, I read something the other day where some activist groups were looking to raise the marginal rate from 5.99 to 13%. The top rate had been 9%, 9.9%. So, and then that came as a revenue neutral situation, and it was made possible because we eliminated certain credits and deductions and exemptions, so it was able to be revenue neutral. So then to say, okay, well, not only are we going to go back to the 9.9 or the 13%, but add on, that rate might and not include the deductions. You've created a situation that's exponentially
right, the effective
worse.
burden is higher than the 13.9, which would itself be
yeah. So that came up on the floor last year, not the 13%, but just efforts to continue to strike down that reform. So preserving that is very important. Also, we maintain that we're very concerned that the broadening of the state sales tax is going to reappear, and that is a non-starter as far as the business community and the chamber is concerned. 2 years ago when that issue surfaced, although it would have it broadened the base and potentially would have lowered the rate in some areas, but it would have introduced new levels of taxation on a wide variety of industries. But more importantly, it would have taken an additional $165 million out of the pockets of the business community. So the small business community is very fearful that this initiative is going to resurface, and I'm sure it will resurface.
So the governor will propose it again? Is that okay?
Somebody will.
I just wonder why they would actually do that, or the governor or someone else would do when there was such a broad opposition. They think that's just being unresponsive to the business community's needs if they brought it up. Would you guys? Is that what you would think, like being unresponsive?
I don't know. It makes no sense to me because there wasn't any. The General Assembly leaders on both sides were equally non-receptive to the idea, and I think the outcry from the small business community and businesses across the spectrum it's sort of engaged and mobilized, the entire swath of business across a wide selection of industries. So it was a
So at least on the tax and regulatory front, it seems like the Chamber's game plan is to play defense.
Well, I do have two pieces of offense.
And those would be?
Two legislative issues. One is the deferral of the minimum tax.
The minimum alternative tax? Is that
No, the business, the $500 business registration tax. And that would be deferred for 3 years. And the purpose of that would be to stimulate startup activity and new company formation. And it went up from 300 to 500 a couple of years ago, but we hear constant referencing of the unfairness of that, and particularly if relative to LLCs and LLPs, what you have in essence is double taxation. So if it's leveled on, the C Corp and the S Corp, and then the LLPs and the LLCs that are created as, companion entities, so you're continuing to, chalk up additional fees. And
right. Every time some small businessman starts,
or woman,
small business starts an affiliate versus a subsidiary,
yes,
they get the $500.
So it's perceived as inappropriate nickel and diming.
And what's the second?
The second one is let me just finish out that one. That one is to if we're going to focus on entrepreneurial and startup activity and new company formation, it's a way to begin to address that. The second one is the transfer of research and development tax credits from unprofitable life sciences companies, technology, biotechnology companies, and the ability to transfer those credits or net operating losses to a profitable C corporation. And it's modeled after a New Jersey statute, and I can get you the language that we've drafted, and also the what they've done in Massachusetts.
So can you give me an example of what you're talking about? An R&D tax credit that maybe a lifespan subsidiary has?
Like a small research and development tax credit. So there's still tax credits for that. So if you are a company and you were to invest in R&D and you were eligible for a tax credit, but you're unprofitable as an entity, you could transfer those credits up to 80% of the value to a profitable C corporation. So again, it's encouraging investment, additional investment in R&D. So it's a way to stimulate further research R&D activity. And if you look at the index, that's an area where Rhode Island needs to improve in terms of its R&D capacity, both federal funding and industry R&D and private sector R&D. So it's akin to the historic tax credits, the selling of those historic tax credits, but it would be done with appropriate limitations and qualifications and expectations. So it wouldn't be, it would be capped, and there would be certain parameters in effect. They'd have to be non-related entities and the like. So those are two ideas that we have that are modeled after what other states might be doing to.
So what's the fear that, or is there any concern at all that the brokering of those tax credits is going to fall to the same two people that do virtually all the other tax credits in the state? Are you worried about a political fallout when it inevitably comes down to the fact that they're tied to the speaker?
We were looking, we spent probably 6 months with members of our CPA community, and we were looking at various ideas across the spectrum in terms of how to stimulate more knowledge-related activity. And these were two ideas. In fact, Steve Lane from Zymetica, are you familiar with Steve? Steve brought this particular proposal to our attention because it had worked well in New Jersey. It was very attractive there. And he thought it was something that we should take a look at here. So it came from a member of the community, if you will, a member of the innovation community about what he himself felt would be an important stimulus. We looked at a few other things too. We looked at pools of money to stimulate SBIR and STTR activity, but we couldn't find any other states that actually use state dollars for that. It's mostly university money. It was our impression that, and Rhode Island ranks very poorly on SBIR and STTR take-up rates and applications, and that's another thing. If you look at the Knowledge Economy Index, indicators of states that really are aggressive about getting their industry to apply for these and understanding what the federal research enterprises are looking for in terms of new discoveries or patents or whatnot. And Rhode Island is particularly well suited to have SBIR, STTR take up because of the defense industry and the life sciences industry. But alas, more work needs to be done to encourage other than just the usual players to apply for those grants. But it is one aspect on the benchmarking index that is recorded and looked at and viewed as an indicator of knowledge economy capacity.
And you said defense and healthcare is?
Like life science
right,
research.
Right. Yeah, I just want to be sure. So to a different economic asset, let's put it that way. So the governor sees the station district by T.F. Green as one of the state's primary assets.
Mm-hmm.
What's the chamber doing to attract an anchor company or a developer who could get that project rolling? And have you gone out looking for somebody, actively looking for somebody? Are you marketing that outside the state? Or
the station district
the
in Warwick?
station district. I mean, what it lacks right now is demand or someone willing to
Mm-hmm.
build in advance of demand.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that would spur that is if we, Rhode Island, landed an anchor of some
Mm-hmm.
sort, and a headquarters of some sort, or some sort of some developer who's willing to do work on maybe a 10-year time horizon. Is the chamber looking at that at all? Doing anything actively to push that along? If that's one of the key assets, you would think that that's one of the things you'd be looking at.
Mm-hmm. We are more focused on the Knowledge District in Providence and working with our institutional partners in the city around what could occur in those areas that would be catalytic. So in terms of private sector investment in the station district, not so much. What we had been doing around the airport and it being a key asset, of course, was really strongly advocating for the runway extension and the dropping of the lawsuit by the members of the Warwick City Council. So we teamed up with the labor community, particularly the building trades, and back in the spring or late winter, worked on that and came to a successful outcome on them dropping the suit, and then the addition of federal monies to continue with that, with the EIS, planning. And we also have worked on the JetBlue thing. We've hosted a couple of receptions for JetBlue before they made the decision. And just as importantly, what they wanted from the local business community was travel data patterns. What's the industry? Where is the industry collectively flying to now? Where are they flying from? What connections would be most conducive? Where do they need to be that they don't have direct service, et cetera? So
isn't that just half the battle, though? Great. So we
yeah,
get
it's
the,
half the battle. Yeah.
You get the runway in, and it gets to full capacity. There's still 100 acres of land across Jefferson Boulevard.
Yeah.
That the city.
I did talk with Mike D'Ambra. One day we had some consultants in from the Boston Consulting Group. Actually, the governor actually had some consultants from the Boston Consulting Group in, and we participated in a site visit with them. So they were representative of the financial services community. They were looking to, on behalf of their clients, take some of their clients out of the major metropolitan cities and put them into smaller areas to reduce costs and whatnot. So I think it's part of a trend where you're taking financial services companies and dispersing them or decanting them across the nation. So Providence or Rhode Island potentially being a non-major metropolitan place, good financial services backbone, good download speeds, good technology infrastructure, and lots of very high-profile financial service companies from Amica and FM Global and Fidelity and Metropolitan and the like. So we did take them down as a group. And
To the station district?
Yes, to the station district.
When was this?
This was in the fall. It was right after Labor Day. I have some pictures of it. If you, I took a few pictures of it. So if you decide you want to pursue that, I'd be happy to shoot one over. But we went down and we talked about the Amtrak station or the MBTA station, as it were. Mike D'Ambra was there on the tour as well, and he was very ebullient about the possibilities of what he was going to do there in terms of getting out of the construction industry and go into the development, really be a catalyst for development. Are you familiar with what he's trying to do down there?
Sure.
Mike
Oh,
D'Ambra,
yeah.
So he played the central role in that piece of the puzzle. But,
Yeah, it's his piece.
Yeah.
He should be. I mean, he should be the one that.
Yeah.
He was the host.
Yeah.
He's the
So
one.
beyond that, no, we have not.
What was the response from the consultants at BCG?
Nodding, very interested,
Okay.
very interesting kind of thing, but
They made no commitments.
no
per se.
commitments,
Okay.
no.
There
But
we go.
I do, I do give the governor credit for reaching out and bring. That's what it's all about. In fact, it's what it's all about. We did have another crew of site selection executives in town in, I want to say, the spring. They were they were in town during the America's Cup races, and it was part of an effort to show them the other assets of Rhode Island besides the sailing and whatnot. So we took them on a tour of northern Rhode Island, some of the industrial parks up there, the Fidelity campus. The Warwick Station District was on that, but I wasn't on that particular aspect of the tour. But we did take them to the Knowledge District. We took them around, showed them the parcels, showed them the medical school, showed them the hospitals and the other colleges, some of the startup companies in the area, and then we made the case on knowledge economy assets and student population and whatnot. So our Providence Chamber focus was more on selling the value proposition of that particular geography.
So, speaking about the knowledge economy and the keynote at the chamber dinner, Mike Mahoney talked about the Stanford biodesign process.
Mm-hmm.
So, what steps is the chamber taking? He was very high on that as the way to go, as the way to commercialize research. What steps is the chamber taking to convince Brown and URI to adopt that? Or if not, if you don't think that's the way to go, why isn't it the way to go?
The biodesign zip code, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we were. Are you talking about the opportunity to
So he talked about
take down the scholarship and et cetera? Yeah.
Right. It was about a way of getting researchers to hook up with investors and with and other people who could help commercialize research. That from the graduate student level or even the undergraduate student level all the way up through the faculty. It's basically a mining process in a way.
Well, he was very gracious to offer 2 scholarships to that Stanford program. They're worth $15,000 apiece. So it's a competitive process. And after the annual meeting, we went out into the field and we canvassed our research community and we generated 6 applications and. We selected 2. We made 2 recommendations to Boston Scientific on Friday, as a matter of fact.
And those would be?
It would be Dr. Peter Snyder from Lifespan and a woman from the University of Rhode Island, I believe from the College of Nursing, but I wasn't acquainted with her as such. I can't remember her name, but we can get that if
Yeah, if
you're
you
at all
can-
interested.
Yes, we are very interested.
Okay. So yeah, they were very, they eagerly responded to the invitation to follow up on that. So we were happy to move that through the system and get back to Boston Scientific right away.
Good, good. So this is going to be an out-of-state reference, and one of the pieces that I did as part of the Reinvent series focused on Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a city that's really still struggling too. It's a capital
Mhm.
city, like Providence. Several years ago, when the business community there looked at what that area needed to get revitalized, one of the things they looked at was the things they found was a dearth of science and engineering education
Yep.
available to the region. And if somebody had, some high school kid had that talent, he went
Mhm.
even as far away as, even as close as Penn State was enough to draw them away, or Philadelphia was enough to draw them away,
Mhm.
never to return. So they started the Harrisburg Science and Engineering School.
Mm-hmm.
What, if anything, has the Chamber of the Business Community in Rhode Island done that's on par with that? They put a big stake in the ground, literally, and the Chamber and the business community put up some of the money to start something that they see as a long-term job generator.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody in the Rhode Island business community done anything to that extent?
In terms of actually seeding or getting in, heights.
Seeding some.
Yeah,
It didn't have to be. I don't. Even if it's not a college. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know no new colleges have started, but anything to that level.
I know STAC, the Rhode Island Science and Technology Advisory Council, had an initiative a year or two ago that was aimed, I think, specifically at young girls, school-age girls, and getting them interested in science and technology as careers. But I don't know that there's been anything formal in terms of stimulating demand. But it, again, going back to the index, it's something that we measure, and it's something that the number of science and technology or science and engineers in the workforce in Rhode Island is either steady or has seen a little bit of a dip. So it is an area that needs to have more and continued focus. But the Chamber has not done anything specifically proactive in that regard, geared to those particular disciplines. But I will say that a couple of years ago we seeded a project with Tech Collective that would start an internship portal, so a central place for employers and college students mostly, to be able to go to one place and see the range and plethora of internship opportunities, and vice versa, those that are interested in interns. So it's a marketplace for interns, and we know from a lot of the research in the field that how do you get young people to stay in our community? And you do that by connecting them with employers early on, because they develop relationships, the potential for being offered a job increases, and it's relationship building, and they're able to network them into other places and whatnot. So connecting college students with internship opportunities is a very important strategy. So Tech Collective, and then later ACU, which is the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, and we provided some seed money to them to begin this internship portal development, and it just went online several months ago, and I have it in my packet, as a matter of fact, the address, if you want to take a look at it.
I'll find it.
It's called the Bridge Program.
Oh,
It's
right.
HTTPS, RI Bridge. It's a weird kind of address, but
I see it.
it's a weird address. But that I think has great potential, particularly if we could get some of the science and engineering intensive employers like Raytheon and some of the defense contractors to populate the database with their jobs in those areas. I think that the more the more throughput you have in terms of jobs and people.
Have you met with people at Textron and Raytheon and any of these companies with their HR people and say, get on board today? Why wait?
Yeah, the Rhode Island Student Loan Authority with ACU is taking the lead on that now. So we provided some of the seed capital to get the program going, and it's a little bit in the beta stage right now because it is new, and I know that this spring, the early spring will be the heavy demand for the internship season as people start to line up their summer opportunities.
This other initiative that you talked about, the Tech Collective, how long has that been in place? You guys have done that?
No, it's the same project.
Oh, it's the same one. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
So it started. We seeded. We seeded. Our chamber money went to Tech Collective and ACU, and they developed. They developed the model and how it would work and the portal, and then Rhode Island Student Loan Authority wanted to, do something very similar. So one thing we're very good at this state is redundant systems and whatnot.
Right.
So the idea was not to have redundant system, is to consolidate the efforts. And frankly, you hear that from employers all the time, but they're called upon to provide internship opportunities, but the left hand and the right hand, don't talk to one another. So if PC is calling, then the next day RISD is calling, and CCRI, and there has to be a central coordinating place to to gather all those, just from an expediency point of view, and frankly also how to teach employers how to be good hosts of interns, because some people may have had lousy internship experiences if they're not doing something very useful and productive. So I think that's we're pretty proud of doing that, but I think as time progresses, we'll be able to work with them to help get the word out within the business community. But
we're talking about seeding projects, the chamber actually offering money to support projects. One of the things we're interested in is, David Dooley's been talking recently about an R&D park down at the Kingston campus for URI. Is that something that the chamber could get involved in, and actually, rather than just supporting, but provide some money to make it happen?
He hasn't asked us for any money at this point, and I know.
Why are you waiting? Why would you wait?
Okay, but what we are doing right now with URI and the Founders League and Brown is stimulating or getting that RICE 2.0 model going. So the chamber is putting $100,000 into that, and that project is in the works right now. We just our board just last month approved the proposition, and so we'll be working. You're familiar with RICE 1.0, right? You know the story there. When it kind of reached the end of its rope, it was at Brown, it was at Brown, but it wasn't necessarily a Brown. Brown hosted it, so it turned out that what the community was looking for was something that was broader, and that was actually led by an entrepreneurial-minded group of folks. So the RICE 1.0 model ended, and the idea was to transition to the next stage. And we had a great rapport with them. In fact, we funded a lot of their boot camps and training sessions. The chamber did a lot of investment in that. We probably, I want to say we put $50,000-$60,000 into that to begin to allow them to offer the mentoring and the skilled professional development that the startup community needed. So anyway, so that comes to an end, and then we reach the next threshold, which is, okay, where do you go from here? And Beta Spring and the chamber, Brown University and the University of Rhode Island stepped up to the plate within the last several weeks, and the chamber is putting in $100 to understand how RICE 2.0 might best be fashioned. Where is it headquartered? What kind of incubation space? What kinds of programming? Should it be a for-profit or a not-for-profit entity? I've gone up and I've looked at the incubation space in Boston. The name is escaping me right now. you know, do you remember what the name of that was? The MIT, the group that's spun off out of MIT, where they actually own can you Google that? I went up there and looked at that because it's a great model. I took a tour. The leaders of that project showed me around it. What it is, they say it's the ugliest building in the Cambridge area. It's like a cement, very brutalistic type building, and inside it's a teeming, hive of activity with entrepreneurs at all stages of their life cycle teaming up and taking residence there and getting the full array of services. So you'd have a venture capitalist perhaps, or an accountant, lawyer, service provider, all sort of within the same building, same atmosphere. This space is able to be configured. You could either be in a little closet area, or depending on the point of your growth, you could have several bays going down, or you can expand, contract. And the key is that it's 1 month leasing, so it's ready-made. It's turnkey office space, and they have the concierge service and the servers and all the things that are details that are sort of a pain to really resource. Right. It's all taken care of for you. So it's concierge type incubation space with the right critical mass with fellow entrepreneurs, fellow service providers. So took a look at that, and they did you get it?
I'm having phone issues.
Okay.
So would you do the same thing here?
Yeah, that's
would be
yeah,
the same thing.
Yeah.
Have a building, people would come in temporarily.
Right. Right, and build up. They're doing a little bit of that now, but what you need is that times like 20x,
right,
if you will, in order to really get the critical mass and the people and the like-minded folks, and then the service providers that are, critical.
Innovation Center.
The what?
The Cambridge Innovation Center.
Cambridge Innovation Center. Very good. Cambridge Innovation Center.
And the other partners in the project, are they making the same sort of contribution? You said the chamber's contributing 100,000.
I think Brown is doing 250. I think URI is doing 50 in the first year. But that's an opening. Our particular set of dollars is for the effort to sustain the community as it was, and there are a lot of tenants that were housed at Davewall Square that seamlessly were able to move over to the new incubation space over at Beta Spring, which is have you been over there?
No, I haven't.
It's on
I built the floor
Chestnut Street. Huh?
I worked construction for a while I was working my way through college, and I built a floor there.
On 95 Chestnut Street?
The Davewall Square.
Davewall Square. So the idea is that all these companies were in your beautiful space that had a beautiful floor.
Yes, they
floor
do.
Plan
I'm very proud of the fact that the floor is still there and in shape.
And in December, it was supposed to go away, or that
right.
particular opportunity. So, but no one wanted to see that community that had begun to really galvanize to lose the momentum. It would be a shame, because we worked, as a community for several years, 3 or 4 years on this whole notion. But so that I'm very excited about the investment in that, because a lot of the reading that I've been doing, the National Governors Association has a white paper that they put out that I studied in great detail. But creating an entrepreneurial environment, I have it in my book here if you want to check it out. But the key elements to any successful state, local, business-driven economic development program, very key. The top of the pecking order: competitive tax environment and regulatory environment. Regulatory environment that's efficient, transparent, predictable, consistent. So, in other words, what the statute says, or what the regulations say with respect to the fire code, or with respect to anything else, would be mirrored across any geographic footprint. So that is a real problem in Rhode Island, and that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the rankings, getting back to your very first question,
Mhm.
the permitting and regulatory environment is viewed to be very punitive and very onerous here. So that's being worked on through Leslie Tato and what she's doing. She's spending 2 years she's gone to every city and town to, map out what their permitting and licensing processes are, zoning, et cetera, and she's come up with, she shared with me several nightmarish scenarios about, different communities where what it would take to get a building permit, the steps that you have to
Right.
take, what you have to go through. It could fill an entire wall with, flow charts and whatnot. But when you think about, I know it's an esoteric subject and it sounds very cut and dry and a bit tedious, but if you think about delay, and there's an acronym for that, DURT, so dirt, but with a U, delay, uncertainty, regulation, and taxes spells death in terms of business growth. And the more you delay and have uncertainty and really very onerous and punitive regulatory and tax schemes, then it makes it very hard for a new company formation. And people, if they can't get their permits, then they're not hiring, they're not reinvesting, and those are jobs that are just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for the bureaucracy to kick in. So that's why. Well, so that's why if you look at the rankings, what are some of the real problems in that area? So it's a very tedious topic, but make no mistake, it's very important. Now, I was going to bring up something else.
We're going to talk. So we're on the subject of the Knowledge District.
Yeah.
Also talking about URI, the
Yeah.
nursing school.
Nursing school, yeah, I want to
You
talk
brought
about
this-
that.
I mean, this is in your packet here too. It's obviously a priority for the chamber.
Yes, for the last actually 3 years.
So now it seems like it really should be coming together.
Yes.
But there's some questions surrounding it.
Mhm.
What's the chamber doing to make that happen?
Yeah, well, we've had this on our legislative agenda for last year very strongly, and then the year before. Admittedly, the year prior, it was a relatively new concept, and the leadership didn't have sufficient comfort and understanding of what a public-private partnership would look like, what that would entail. There was also talk about putting it on the ballot as a bond issue. So last year in particular, I think the project suffered from, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to do it as a bond issue, or are we going to do it as a public-private partnership? And then as the session wore on, the 38 Studios issue came to a head. And I think it sucked all the oxygen out of the room in terms of having the appetite to take on or really contemplate another big project, which I think is most unfortunate because our view of the 38 Studios situation is that you got to get back on the horse, and we need to continue to make investments in projects that make sense. So I think this year it has an excellent chance of people having had the time and the opportunity to understand what a public-private partnership might look like, the relative minimal investment, if you will, that is needed to get the project going, which would be around architect and engineering, studies and requests for proposals from a developer, et cetera. And the key there is to get the state to be committed to the project and to get in the budget the lease back of the space, so that the developer, whoever that may be, would have the confidence that there would be a long-term lease in place, which would make it easier to get other tenants.
When you talk about the state, who are you talking about? Which bodies in the state government are you talking about?
Department of Administration and the legislature and the governor's office, because it would have to be a budget article. It would have to be in the budget. Department of Administration plays a role in the whole RFP situation, and the legislature has to approve it.
Are there developers interested in doing this?
Yes.
Developers that the chamber has actively sought out, or people that
Well, it's common knowledge that this is a very exciting project, and I'm sure that Gilbanes and Dimios and others in the marketplace would be interested in
So are
working.
so are you and John, the other non-Gilbane Dimeo members of the board, turning to them and putting the screws to them?
No,
or
no, because
giving them a sell?
No, because that's not where the that's not where the pressure point is at the moment. The pressure point is to again, the RFP process, the selection of a developer would be a competitive bid situation.
Right.
So the idea is to sell the concept and the vision, and the vision is that we know that there's going to be a nursing shortage. There had been a nursing shortage, and then it sort of tapered off because of the financial calamities in the marketplace. So nurses that were planning to retire, staying in the workforce a little longer because of the upheaval in the stock market. So the planned nursing shortage, I think, is just a little bit more delayed, but it's coming down the pike, particularly as baby boomers begin to age. So we will get to a point where there is a huge nursing shortage, and keeping people out of the hospitals and into other alternative settings will create a large demand for this. So we know that there's large demand for healthcare professionals, but what makes this project even more interesting and more catalytic is that it would be they would work in conjunction with the medical school at Brown University. So the nursing facilities, or the nursing staff, the nursing professionals from both RIC and URI, working hand in glove with the medical school professionals. And then Johnson & Wales is also putting forth and beginning a program in physician's assistant. So that's the one step above nursing, and a notch below the physician. So you see the physician's assistant, you see the nursing, you see the MD training. And then as a public-private partnership, there's room in that building for others to come in, other private sector entities to do an R&D lab, or pharmaceutical companies doing research. So it has the great potential to save the state money also, because I think it's a more cost-effective option rather than building on two separate campuses. But happily and luckily, it has the added benefit of being able to concentrate resources in a tight geographic area and develop a lot of the synergies that's necessary. You saw that in Baltimore.
Right. I mean, obviously it sounds really good. We have private, chamber supportive, potentially private developers coming and doing this. We know that URI is supportive of the idea. RIC, probably, I guess. You mentioned the Department of Administration. Are we talking the governor's office? I mean, is that the key to get the governor on board here? Because if it's not going to be a bond issue, it's an RFP, then is it the governor?
It's the governor and the legislature, because they both would have to, but both equally, yes. And I know there's ongoing discussions with Director Leach in terms of how it might work and the form and function. But yeah, because it does involve the commitment of the state in setting up a long-term lease obligation.
So,
so the Properties Committee is a child of the DOA.
So is the chamber having discussions with the governor's office, with the Department of Administration?
I've met with the governor. We have met with the governor
Recently?
last spring around this topic.
But there hasn't been any movement since then?
No. We talked about it at our annual meeting as a signature.
So what
signature.
about with Gordon and Teresa?
Yeah, they
Let me be more specific. When did you last speak to Gordon or Teresa Ivoweed about this particular topic?
At the end of the session last year, when it adjourned. Yeah.
6 months ago.
Right.
All right. So if the legislature is coming into session January 1, when do you expect to talk to them next about this? If this is a catalytic project that should get going, why are you waiting?
Well, the University of Rhode Island needs to take the lead, and in fact, I've talked with President Dooley as recently as last week, and his designee on the issue, as recently as this morning on where things stand and where we are in terms of a process to get some questions answered and to move it through the pipeline.
Who's Dooley's designating this?
Carrie Bennett.
So do they just not have, I don't know, plans that are detailed enough at this point? Is that the issue?
It's hard to say what the issue is. It's hard to say what the issue is. I have counseled President Dooley most recently as last week. I want to say last Wednesday, actually. I'm on the President's Advisory Committee at the University of Rhode Island. That time is of the essence now, and we saw how uncertainty hindered the project last year because of the whole thing of, was it going to be a bond issue, was it going to be a public-private partnership, and it went down with the stated reason, like there was too much uncertainty. But I already explained what I thought some of the issues were. But we're in a fresh legislative session. There's pent-up demand. There's a lot of frustration and, frankly, a lot of anger in the marketplace now about lack of progress. And so let's not get ourselves into the same, let's not let the clock tick down for the 2013 session.
So then why don't you, or John Duffy and George D., go to Gordon, tomorrow, Friday, and Teresa Pivaweed, and said, we need this to happen. George has been banging the drum for 4 years about projects to get the construction trades back to work.
And it's, Mike Sabatoni and I have written op-ed
So
pieces on it.
who's not getting paid?
Who's not getting paid?
Who's hanging it up? Is it the bond lawyers who want a piece of this?
I'm not aware of any of that.
I just wonder if if you say it's a priority, and again, we've heard support from other people about this. 6 months and there haven't been any discussions. It seems like that's not a priority then.
Yeah. Well, I know that that URI, through Carrie and through Dr. Dooley, have met repeatedly with Director Leach and with representatives of the governor's office and the Board of Governors, et cetera. Well, the Board of Governors, that doesn't exist anymore, but.
Right.
Okay. So speaking of.
So what the chamber can do in the off season that we haven't already done or haven't communicated.
Yeah, the off season is 3 weeks.
Yeah, the off season. The on season starts in earnest.
Right. So I'm just going to move on.
Okay.
From it. So speaking of political leadership, at one point you an op-ed in our own paper called Gordon Fox and Teresa Pivaweed enlightened on tax reform.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of a multi-part question. A, would you consider Governor Chafee enlightened on tax reform? And of course, Steve just left.
That would have been it right there.
That would have been it. You're lucky. And if do you consider them enlightened on other economic issues, for instance, on tax incentives, on the 38 Studios issue?
Okay, 38 Studios, the chamber did not take a position on that. So, and we wouldn't have supported the $75 million going to one company anyway. But
you did take a position, which is that you didn't support it.
Yeah. Well, we did not. We weren't privy to the numbers, so it would be intellectually dishonest to jump in and make a decision one way, or make an evaluation not having been privy to anything other than just.
So then taking that as the starting point, what do you see? Describe for me your opinion of Fox and Pivaweed, the leadership, their ability to grasp and understand tax incentive issues and other business incentive issues. Do you think they grasp the concepts?
Yes, they do.
And do you think that they have a set of priorities for those things that line up with what the chamber's membership sees?
Tax reform never would have happened without the leadership of those two bodies, for sure. And I have to say that since I've been since I've been the president of the chamber, which has been since 2005. We've been very aggressive in working with the legislative leaders and helping to frame the issues in a way that makes sense from a public policy point of view. And I can truly say that that they do get it, that they are very responsive, that they care about the views of the business community. They reach out to us on a regular basis to ask for our feedback and thoughts and ideas. And our legislative counsel, Kelly Sheridan, do you know Kelly? Being a resource. So he together, as we together have worked hard to be resources for them so that they can use us as a sounding board in terms of, well, how does this affect our economic profile, our economic development profile? So I have absolutely no qualms about saying that the chamber has enjoyed an excellent relationship with both President Piberweed and Speaker Fox, and they participate in our legislative luncheon. They have each of them the entire time that they've been the leaders. They are open to what we have to say. The Senate recently, a couple of years ago, when they took a first stab at regulatory relief and overhauling some of the the master applications and other things, they unveiled their programs at the chamber. They wanted to come and use our facilities and have the press conferences there, and to say that there's a direct correlation between what they're trying to do with business. So I believe that the legislative leadership is responsive to the needs and concerns of business, and they were great on the sales tax issue.
So what about Chafee?
Chafee is, he will listen. He will listen to your views. He will, but he will more than likely retreat to his original point of view. So he was very convinced that the expansion of the sales tax was a good idea. He had heard it mentioned by, I believe, Chairman Bernanke somewhere, and he had listened to that. But no, I think that we have our work cut out for us from the business community perspective in terms of working with the governor's office and really drawing the correlation between a competitive tax environment and what that means in terms of company formation and job retention. We have more work to do with him on that.
What is his appointment of Bill Parsons? I was about to say Bill Parcells. Bill Parsons as the EDC's new executive director say to you, and about his grasp of the possibility of economic development reform?
I think it's, it reflects his stated belief. After the RIPEC report, he convened some business leaders in the aftermath of that. I wasn't at that meeting. I happened to be in Denver that day that he called that meeting, so my board chair, John Duffy, attended. But he says in his mind, economic development is principally about education, workforce, and infrastructure. That's what he believes the role of state government is in terms of economic development. And his appointment of Bill Parsons, who is a veteran EDC employee, speaks to that priority, because again, we're talking about real nuts and bolts and the grist of economic development. What he leaves on the table, though, however, is the other side of the equation, which we believe is equally important, which is external marketing. I do not believe that Rhode Island's economy is strong enough to generate growth organically, and that, like any other enterprise, you need to continue to have a churn, because some companies will fall out, others will come in, and you need to have a constant mix, and you can't focus on just one half of the equation. You have to be very focused and determined on growing your existing base, absolutely, positively, but you also have to make the case about what the true unique value proposition is for doing business in Rhode Island and bringing others in, because if you talk to our chamber membership, they will say, if you say to them, beyond taxes and the uncertainty of the regulation, what do you need? What do you need? And they will be very, very candid with you and say, we need more customers. We need more customers. If we don't have more customers, we can't grow our business. So as a state, you're not going to be able to generate enough activity organically. You have to have a full court press touching every single one of the buttons. Having said that, I was pleased to see the RFP that went out from the EDC a couple of weeks ago, and the expedited timetable for the business climate review.
All right.
So that speaks to a sense of urgency, and the language that the EDC uses in that RFP clearly states that Rhode Island lags its competitors. Rhode Island lags, states throughout the country and in the indicators, and it prescribes for the respondent to this RFP to put forth ideas or thoughts and ideas that might be embraced by the administration. So the fact that they themselves, and this is the difference, you're going to say, well, how come it hasn't happened before? But you want to be able to, you bring these ideas to the forefront, but sometimes in order for them to really take ownership of it, they have to see it for themselves.
So what's your fear that what's your fear that study
Yeah.
gets thrown on the shelf?
Yeah.
He borrowed, John Simmons' time for a summer, produced a report. It looks like he just threw it on the shelf.
Mhm.
He's ignoring it. He asked 2 other people to do the same thing in the interim, between the end of the release of the Simmons report and now.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to do another one?
I find that, I do find that puzzling, for sure. The belief that the economy is fixed and that the problems are over and that, several of the indicators seem to be heading in the right direction, but I'm not satisfied that we've made sufficient progress at all in coming out of this recession. And I think there is a tremendous sense of urgency around being vigilant about what's holding us back. And I will say that in the language of the RFP, it's interesting that it says right in there that given the importance of this, subject, the timeliness of this, and whatever, we're demanding that the work be done by February 8th, which is a good sign, good omen. So
theoretically,
one can only hope. One can only hope that the respondent, in fact, will continue to share with the rest of Rhode Island that which we in the business community have known for a long time about some of the real non-starters to growth. Workforce is a huge issue too.
Right.
We haven't even talked about that, but
the chamber, generally speaking, has been a staunch opponent of new taxes and tax increases.
right.
The state, despite its fairly good revenues this year, is projecting deficits to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the chamber how does the chamber propose that the state government rectify that shortfall? Where do the new revenues come, or where do the cuts come to bring spending in line with existing revenues?
Well, we believe that this year, the revenue projections are more positive than previously anticipated. So we're convinced that some of the personal income tax reforms, it will take a number of years to be able to truly say that we've turned the corner on that, because it takes. Everyone knows that that this environment was very difficult for retirees, and that they would leave this area to go to other more tax-friendly havens. But to keep the money, to keep the people, to keep the talent in our state, we feel as though the reform measures we'll do that, but it won't happen overnight. You're going to need 4 or 5 years of tax data to be able to prove that. And it's interesting that the first set of tax data will come out in February under the new system. So it would be last year would have been the first year
Right.
under the new system that it would have kicked in. So that would be a very important piece of information to take a look at. But we believe that the government needs to live within its means, and that we are, in fact, the fact that we would continue to turn to taxation, even nickel and diming taxation on fees here and permits there and pieces there, and pushing it all down to the municipal level too. Has been part of the problem. So you can almost see over the course of the last decade, as the state began to shrink, there wasn't that corresponding shrinkage at the municipal level. So it took some time for it to get into down to the area where the cities and towns have really been forced to tighten down. So now we have it going like this.
Right.
So we might be able to get into a position where, and face it, Rhode Island's a small state, and as we continue to drive people out, people of tax-paying means, and really not a very focused effort on trying to replace those dollars with growth strategies. I think in some respects, growth, the term growth and economic development isn't well understood or even very popular in Rhode Island.
I ask about Twin River.
Mm-hmm.
The chamber once opposed
Yes.
casino in the state, reverse course with Twin River.
Yep.
Obviously, there's some controversy about having casinos in the state, and we don't have to go through the details. But is the chamber working with Twin River, or is there talk of trying to get them to do more for the state? Underwrite programs or do something to support job training. Anything to sort of give back, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did reach out to the president of Twin River, John Taylor, in the month of October, because there was a proposal that was brought to my attention from Dennis Litkey at the Met School. And you're familiar with Dennis? He's a world-class, educator, rock star, creative thinker. And he says we've been working with him and brainstorming with him about a concept he has, which is essentially you can get your degree. You can finish off your degree, either high school or college, by partnering with employers. So say you're a large employer, and so Dennis comes to you and says, okay, you're a CVS. Let's take your non-degree attaining population that is interested in finishing off or getting some kind of certificate or an official 4-year. I think they're working with Roger Williams on this. We'll convene them as a group, and then we will work with this population intensively until we can get them to the point where, on an accelerated schedule, that they would actually get their degree. So it's a way of honing in on a particular population that is looking for that, and doing it in, you can do it during the day, you could do it as part of the workday, partnering with employers.
So would a student be an intern at CVS or Twin River and earn school credit?
Yeah.
While they were
And then also take
take classes at Met.
Yeah, or even on site there.
Right.
So it's an alternative delivery system working with the employer community to get people to that were so inclined to get a college degree. So anyway, we were brainstorming different employers that might have a population that would be interested in this, and so I thought Twin River would be a perfect candidate for that. So I hooked up Dennis with John Taylor and thought it might be might be a nice match. But they are the third, I believe, the third largest source of revenue for state government as it is.
Right.
And we opposed it earlier on because of the change in the Constitution.
Okay.
So there's a lot.
Not for the fact that it was casino in
Right.
and of itself.
Right.
Okay.
There was concerns about cost. And frankly, it was a different environment back then. And,
How was the environment different this time around?
well, now that it's become the third largest source of revenue for the state, that's a pretty compelling argument. Plus, we're surrounded by casinos, and the casino market is changing now in terms of it's very competitive, enticing players to play at your facility versus the leakage of going out of state. And then with Massachusetts poised to put 3 casinos just across the border, it put the Rhode Island taxpayer, we think, pretty much very much in jeopardy in terms of there was leakage coming out of that.
Now, I mean, the chamber obviously stood with Clinton River on that issue, pushed forward in a way. Are there things coming up? I mean, we've sort of gone over this, but I think it's probably good to talk about it again. Are there things next year that the chamber's really going to push up at the State House? And really say that these are the priorities that we want to go to bat for.
Well, you're talking about legislative priorities.
I think it could be. It could really be anything. Whatever. What are the big issues that you guys
Yeah.
want to?
Well, again, it gets, I get back to what does business need, what does business want? And what they want is more customers. They want a competitive tax environment. They want to be able to get their permits and their licenses and not be hassled and get it fairly efficiently. And it's a dogfight, day in and day out, to continue to make progress on that. And once you squeeze the balloon over here, it kind of bulges over there because there's, a reciprocal effort to rescind or, cut back or, abolish or. It's a never-ending battle. It truly is. So the offense and the defense clearly they have to work in tandem. But there's a considerable amount of offense, and defense. There's a considerable amount of defense, and it gets more. I think it gets more difficult in each ensuing year because the state is so fragile. And there is such turmoil and concern, and a fair amount has been cut. And
So I want to turn to, for a minute, 10 minutes left, to some of the more chamber organizational issues. One of the things that came out, one of the many things that came out of our look at the journal's look at the Rhode Island economy this year was the disconnect between the minority community and the white power structure in the state.
absolutely.
All parts of it. So, what specific initiatives does the chamber have in place to connect students of color, business people of color, to the people that they can do business with, the white power structure that is, Jimmy O's a white fan, the Gobains are. Those are the people that have the big money. Those are the big pools of money. Those are the big pools of jobs in the state. How do you work as the mediator and the connector? Do you have a series? Now, I was there 5 or 6 years ago when you went down to Broad Street, and with Jose Brito and was that Ada's Creations? I can't remember her name right now. But that's not a regular event. That was very much like a state visit. When the ambassador from France shows up at your doorstep.
Right.
They were very nervous that, we're going to put on a show because the whites are here.
Yeah.
So what's going on internally on a day-to-day basis to make that happen?
Yeah. Well, we saw that very. We saw the whole knowledge economy conversation being being cast, if you will, in a way that was non-inclusive, and it was probably not particularly well understood in terms of opportunities. And we've been meeting with Mike Van Leesten from OIC. We've been meeting with Adriana Dawson from the SBDC. Do you know Adriana Dawson? I've met with Lisa Ranglin from the new Rhode Island Black Business Association. That's what I believe that they're going to change the name again. But so they asked us if we would, Lisa did from the Black Business Association, help partner with them. They were doing some feasibility studies on how to set up a Chamber of Commerce like organization that would be geared towards Black business professionals.
So would it be a separate entity
Yeah.
from the Providence Chamber, or the
Yeah, it would be
East Greenwich Chamber, or whatever they should?
they wanted it to be a separate entity, but because they're not an established 501c3, they needed a fiduciary agent. So we're discussing with them whether the chamber could be that fiduciary agent, so that they can they have some grant funding that they've lined up from the Rhode Island Foundation. So Lisa reached out to see if the Providence Chamber could help do that. So that's one thing we're working on. But the diversity and the knowledge economy, the whole inclusion aspect of it, is something that's been on our mind for a while. And we just, in fact, got back a series of recommendations. We put out we had compiled for us an issue paper, and it's in your folder there, of some specific ways that the chamber, the business community, could be more proactive in terms of reaching out to the minority population, starting in the high school level. And that's kind of why we had our event, our knowledge economy annual town meeting at the Met School on the south side of Providence. You're familiar with Dennis's place,
sure.
right? So
Yeah,
we went there and showcased what the students there are doing as in terms of company formation, and it's predominantly a minority population there. But if you look at the statistics in terms of new company formation, I think it's out of the minority community, it's very underwhelming at around 2%. So when you have 27% of the population that could be could be noted as either Latino or Black, so 27%, but only 2% generating new companies, it's a real disconnect, and one that has to be remedied, because you have to make the knowledge economy in terms of the innovation economy and new company formation and relevant. And we're not talking about necessarily all positions for PhD scientists or postdoctoral students. And that's the big myth, and the big fallacy, I believe, of what is this strategy? Is it some elite strategy? No, it's not. It's not even. It's if you Google the term knowledge economy, you can hone in on a set of strategies that every state in this country is working on to cultivate their own assets. So it's not something that can be ignored. You can't just say, oh no, well that doesn't apply to us, because if you think about the plethora of opportunities, whether it be on the job training to support bench work, for instance, lab work, lab scientists, paraprofessionals in those areas, employment opportunities that have 2-year degree appeal, 4-year degree, postdoc, on the job training. And then, but you got to start early. You got to work, at the med school level to get students enrolled in science and technology and coursework. We talked about that earlier. That would lead them along that path. And then again, some of the other pieces that we discussed was the critical importance of having a pipeline to internship opportunities. And that's especially important when you're talking about Black and Latino access, because there has to be a very concerted effort to drive the relevancy in that as well. We did We have done summer job shadowing programs in the past, but a lot of that, some of that federal money has sort of gone away. But the specific question that we were trying to ask was, what would be some inclusive and diverse strategies for the Greater Providence knowledge economy? So we haven't even released this yet. Our IPIP committee hasn't even seen it, but we got it in the other day, and I
So
thought it was.
I can't tweet that out.
You can. No.
They've seen it, they just haven't had a chance to comment on it.
Yeah.
It's been emailed out to them.
Okay.
But the other thing that I wanted to say is that it's labeled an issue paper, and it's the whole point of it was, okay, here are some things that could be, here are some stats, and here are some ideas based on what other places are doing. What does the community think of these ideas, and how can we build on them? So this is not the strategy. This is a way to seed some additional ideas and create and cultivate some more of our own. And it was a direct result of conversations we had with Mike and Adriana and some other folks.
So how long has that been in the works, that paper there? When was that commissioned?
It was commissioned November.
So it was just that took place all last month.
The RFP,
No, the
RFP went out this summer, so and it was due back, I think, beginning of October, so that it could be completed. They did it in September and October. They did the research.
Okay. So
So and it talks about the bridge program, that internship portal that I talked about, but the importance of having a pipeline for that. The supply chain, that's another big issue in terms of the supply chain necessary to continue to service the big institutions.
So are you talking about training and educating minority students so that they can be prepared to take jobs in supply chain companies? Is that
Or any of the companies that are in the knowledge economy sphere are not necessarily companies that are the exclusive domain of PhD scientists.
right? I'm just trying to make sure I understood what the goal was. You did, okay.
Well, and
No, I get it.
yeah.
So
this is a good piece of work.
So it's 3 o'clock, which hour? So I just
Let
want
me
to
see
give
if
you
there's
the
anything else I would.
right. I wanted to give you the opportunity. I had a couple other questions, but I'll just leave it related to things like that. So whether it's export help, other job training programs, other initiatives that the Chamber is going to work actively on in 2013.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the Founders League and getting
Right.
that squared away. We talked
Right.
about the Rick Nursing School. I didn't tell you about our analysis of the DLT data on knowledge economy industries according to the federal taxonomy. This is one of my favorite pieces. But if you back in 2008 when we developed this body of work, one of the pages that they prepared for us was in the federal taxonomy, the NAICS codes, what constitutes knowledge economy sectors. Okay, so I asked Janet Raymond, our senior VP for economic development, to start scrubbing the DLT data just to see, just for the heck of it, where the numbers have gone in knowledge economy industries. Again, by the federal definition, by the specific codes, where have the job numbers gone between now and then? And it was very telling, very startling that in the non-knowledge economy sectors, a loss of 18,598 jobs, 18,000 plus jobs in the non-knowledge economy sectors, according to the DLT data between 2008 and 2011. And in the knowledge economy sectors, positive growth, and it's not a huge number.
It was small, but it was.
It's like 100 or 89 or something like that. And in some categories, when there's only 1 or 2 employers, you can't. They're an asterisk on the data, because then it becomes self-identifiable, like, a company, if there's only one or two in that sector, they asterisk it out because you don't want to say, oh, that's really way
But
beyond
what it tells you is that in a recessionary environment, those highly skilled jobs are stable. At the very least, they're stable, even in a state that's not doing well, doing the worst, among the worst, in one of the worst recessions. Jobs that are much more tied to consumer demand or lower skill are the ones that get wiped out in a badly structured economy, in a bad recession. So that's a good thing. Stability is, stability is a good thing. Yes, everybody wants to be growing 10% a year, but it would be nice if the Rhode Island economy could be described as stable.
Did those numbers surprise you in any way, or?
Yeah, they did actually.
Really?
Yeah.
But I thought we had long known that the knowledge economy, was growing, or in versus those sort of old line jobs that we had that we were used to rely on.
Yeah. I frankly thought the number would have been more positive on the upside.
Okay. So it wasn't positive enough then?
It wasn't,
So you expected more growth, yeah.
It wasn't positive enough.
Yeah.
I think that's why I believe that there's considerable work to be done, both on the fundamentals and on leveraging the assets that we do have, that can be really scaled up quickly. In terms of what we have to work on in sectors that our competitive analysis back in 2008 suggested areas of great promise. And if you want to talk about something really exciting, what's going on with the Care New England system, with the lifespan system, Brown University and URI around brain science is amazing. And the Norman Prince Neurosciences Institute that they just got money for. And the fact, if you think about, we have a world-renowned, or nationally renowned, let's say, children's psychiatric hospital around Bradley. We have Butler, the psychiatric, the general acute care. We have the amazing work that the BrainGate researchers through the Brown Brain Institute, BIBS, Brain Institute for Brain Science. Brown Institute for Brain Science, BIBS. Have you seen that? The woman who was, who can, just by the power of her thought, was able to move a glass. You've seen?
Yeah, we've seen.
Yeah, so she's a quadriplegic. She had a profound stroke, but they were, Dr. John Donahue invented some kind of chip that could be implanted, that the power of thought, just the idea of moving your hand causes your hand to move, and she can reach for the glass. And then a lot of like concussion science is very big and very topical.
Sure.
And Lifespan has just recruited real rock stars out of the Boston marketplace to head up neuroscience, neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry. So that whole gamut of practice. And with an aging population, so I've pieced this whole thing together, that with an aging population, wellness and healthcare and nutrition, that's where like Johnson & Wales will come in terms of culinary.
It's one of the things I tried to bring up in the food industry report.
The food science cluster.
I
Match
tried
it
really
with the
hard
brain
to get
and
Johnson & Wales to get to that point. I was like, do you understand where you are? You have a culinary program, you have nutrition programs and science and medical buildings right around you. Why aren't you working with them on on some major nutrition programs?
I brought the head of research from Lifespan down to Johnson & Wales to meet with their research person to actually talk about, he's an expert in Alzheimer's, Dr. Peter Snyder, the guy who, the scientist who's got the biodesign award. Right. But he is internationally known for his study and work in Alzheimer's and elderly issues and memory impairment and whatnot. But one of the first things that if somebody is suffering from Alzheimer's, you want to make sure that they're eating correctly and that they're tending to their nutritional, because it can forestall disease.
Right.
the continued progression of the disease. So you have all the elements around brain science, both from an academic, a clinical, and other support and the reputational assets that we have, that I'm convinced that brain science is a real winner for Rhode Island. So Dr. Babineau from Lifespan is really gung-ho on this, and he asked me to serve on the steering committee for the Norman Prince Neurosciences Institute, which is designed to generate partnerships between the academic world and the industry setting, and to make Rhode Island really an epicenter for a lot of this work, because it is the next frontier. If you think about it, cardiac issues and cancer issues have really seen great prominence over the last couple of decades, but the
technology,
brain science,
and computer software and computing power are making it more possible to map the brain and to mimic the brain's activity.
Yeah.
I mean, something we couldn't do 10 years ago.
Right. And then Care New England with their special, so it is. The other thing that I like about it is it's cross institutional too. So some of the assets, like Bradley, for instance, would be Bradley's in the Lifespan family, but Butler would be in the Care New England family. Women Infants in the Care New England family. So that's why the whole notion of merging the research platforms between Care New England and Lifespan, which there was a great editorial 2 days ago. So I was glad, because that came out of the chamber, the chamber meeting. But people take this, the whole idea of collaboration. It doesn't seem very, it doesn't seem very sexy, if you will. And Dennis Keefe, I was just having lunch with him before I came here, and he said the whole idea that Care New England and Lifespan are breaking down the silos, beginning with the research enterprises, is so unheard of. And he said it doesn't sound like much, but it just has never happened before, and that everybody was kind of to their own knitting and didn't know other people in the, even if they're, working in the same disciplines, just, breaking that down and getting people to work together and to collaborate, he says it's really huge, and on the outside looking in, you might tend to underestimate the importance of that and the power of that, but he comes from Massachusetts. He comes from, I think he comes from the Brigham system, if I'm not mistaken, but he's taken a lot of ideas that he has seen, work there through the Partners Health Group, and wants to. He has some new thoughts, and Dr. Babineau being new, and the president of Brown being new, and the head of Care New England, the head of Blue Cross, all relatively new players in this marketplace.
Do you think Paxton gets it? Do you think Paxton, because her expertise is in international relations and economics and how they affect the third world countries, basically. That's not a development background.
Mm-hmm. She's an economist, but I met with her when she came in, and in the summer I wanted to make sure that I got over there, and I told her all about the Knowledge Economy Action Agenda and what an important role Brown plays with all the other universities, and encouraged her to personally play a leadership role, because we need the presidents of these institutions to send a signal that they're committed, and that we needed her, and that we need Dr. Babineau, we need, President Keefe, that we need the heads, Dr. Dooley and others. We need them, we need their leadership, and we need them to send the signal that they're all, I was going to say all in, but I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Don't do that.
That they are all invested, fully invested in this movement. But yes, and she, watch the engineering school issue. She said to me that we have an engineering school at the site. I want to do that in the next year. I want it to be in the Knowledge District. I'm committed to being.
And what street is it on?
Well, I don't know, but you don't want to drive up the real estate prices. That's another thing. That's if you talk about what the, some of the the nuances around signaling too strongly and too early, because you say, okay, well, we're going to put a nursing school there. well, what happens to the price of that parcel? What happens to the contiguous parcels? It becomes, the marketplace becomes skewed. So in some respects, I think you want to keep your cards close and not really broadcast or telegraph. So there are some other issues around that. That's what I was told this morning. No, not you, but I'm just saying that's what that's what I was told this morning by URI, some of the other things that have to be worked out. But.
Sure. Great. Look, you've been here for 2 hours. You gave us a lot of time. We appreciate it.